Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at a really interesting text. It's called Religion of Physicists.txt, and it puts forward a pretty, well, unexpected view on physics.
Definitely unexpected.
Yeah, the main argument is quite provocative. It's suggesting that physicists, we tend to see them as purely objective.
Right, as the ultimate knowers.
Exactly. But this text argues they actually operate with a belief system almost like, well, like a religion.
Which is a pretty bold claim.
It is. So our mission today is to unpack the examples the source gives for what physicists supposedly believe in and try to understand why the source frames it as faith. It's definitely thought-provoking.
It really challenges that standard image, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Physics is just hard facts, pure observation.
Totally. So let's keep an open mind.
Good idea. It's interesting how it takes these really fundamental physics concepts and methods and just flips the perspective, looking at them as beliefs.
Right. And the source starts right out saying, we physicists believe a lot of stuff. It even says they're as religious as they come, but work hard to seem like knowers, not believers.
And it claims that posture, the knower versus believer, is common in religions too.
Mm-hmm. So where does the source actually see these beliefs in physics? It seems to dig into some really basic building blocks.
Yeah, foundational stuff. Things that, according to the text, physicists use all the time but maybe can't fully define, or where they sort of overlook certain tricky aspects.
Okay, like what specifically?
Well, it points heavily towards mathematics, actually, like a deep belief in numbers themselves, or infinities, continuity, the idea that things are smooth, unbroken.
Ah, okay. Abstract concepts.
Exactly. Abstract concepts that are fundamental tools. The source argues physicists believe in these, use them constantly, even if defining them perfectly is, well, maybe impossible, or leads to paradoxes they kind of have to sidestep.
Right, right. And it's not just the math side?
No, it also looks at how they see the physical world itself, like believing in differences, seeing this object as separate from that object.
Yeah.
But the text argues maybe ignoring the fuzzy boundaries between them in reality. Or think about particles, quanta believing in them, treating things as these separate little bits.
Which is fundamental to quantum mechanics.
Absolutely. But the source suggests maybe physicists overlook some of the really weird or difficult consequences that pop up when you insist on separating everything like that.
Interesting. So it's looking at both the tools and the worldview.
And the process, too. It critiques the belief in the scientific method itself.
How so?
Well, arguing that physicists might sometimes overlook real-world messiness. Things like measurement problems,
Yeah.
or the line we draw between the experiment, the apparatus, and everything else, the environment. That line can be pretty artificial.
Yeah, I can see that. Like in modeling, too.
Exactly the same point. Believing in modeling, creating these simplified versions of reality, but that often means ignoring the artificial lines within the model itself.
And then there's just the basic belief in stuff.
Yeah, just stuff. Believing that physical reality exists, but maybe not fully grappling with what that stuff is, fundamentally, its ultimate nature.
Okay, so if we pull this all together, the source's main point is that these aren't just like necessary working assumptions.
It argues they're more than that. They're treated as core beliefs. The text pretty pointedly says physicists are religious people using the flawed scientific method as our shield.
Wow, okay, so the belief part is in the accepting of undefined things or ignoring complexities or overlooking consequences, all to keep the whole system moving forward.
That seems to be the core argument.
Yeah.
That this acceptance, maybe even a kind of faith, forms the foundation that allows physics to make progress.
The source brings up other examples too, right? Like time and space.
The belief that time and space are sort of symmetrical, on equal footing. But the text questions that, suggesting maybe time is fundamentally different, just a measure of change, not another dimension like space.
And the second law of thermodynamics. That one surprised me.
Yeah, the idea that entropy always increases. The source argues that this law relies heavily on our human definitions, how we define a system, or what counts as order. It questions if it's truly an inherent property of nature itself or more of a consequence of our framework.
So it's drawing a line between nature having properties, which we then try to describe with laws,
versus believing that nature intrinsically follows or obeys laws like commands. It's subtle, but it's a different way of looking at scientific laws.
Okay, so stepping back, why is this perspective useful? Why do this deep dive?
Well, I think it challenges that perhaps oversimplified view you mentioned earlier, science as just collecting objective facts.
Yeah, it suggests that even in physics, arguably our most fundamental science, the bedrock might involve assumptions we just accept. or simplifications we make, things we agree to believe in, essentially, so we can build theories and move forward.
It gives you a different lens, doesn't it, for looking at how knowledge is built, period.
It really does. It encourages you to maybe look a bit closer at the assumptions underlying fields that seem really certain.
Definitely.
Okay, so quick recap. This text, religionofphysicists.txt, argues physicists have a core set of beliefs about numbers, continuity, method, particles, you name it. They see themselves as knowers, but maybe use the scientific method as a shield for these underlying, perhaps unexamined assumptions.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, inspired by the source. If even fundamental physics seems to require some element of belief, or at least involves strategically ignoring certain difficulties, what does that suggest about knowledge in other areas? What kinds of unspoken beliefs might be propping up how we understand, say, history or economics, or even how our own minds work?
Definitely something to mull over.